The Madman!
And now we continue to see just how off I was with the neutral cards. 3 stars. I originally rated this card a 1-star card. However, because of the elemental tag and because of possibly seeing play in Pirate Warrior, and also because it costs 1 mana for the Hunter quest, there's all these possibilities for the Glacial Shard. I happen to think none of those would work, but I've been convinced that perhaps some of them will pan out. Glacial Shard ends up being a 5-star card. I thought it was a 3-star card because of Quest Hunter, which is completely wrong. Turns out it's 5-star because it's 100% necessary in Quest Rogue. Really good card, in fact, to activate the quest on. Really nice and cheap, stalls out the opponent. Firefly, 5 stars. Even though ultimately in most of my elemental decks I ended up not including Firefly, I found that the card wasn't impactful enough, even though it clearly would help activate elementals. I actually ended up including this card in Discard Warlock because it's a card you can super
play
accidental 5-star.
And I also included the card in Quest Hunter since it counts as 2 1-drops. This is probably one of the best cards in order to finish the Hunter quest. Maybe it'll see play in elemental decks, but maybe it'll be too insignificant to see play in elemental decks too. Alright, so yes, this is a 5-star card, but that's only because Quest Rogue is carrying this card. It's not seeing any of the other cards, any other deck. Also though, it does see some light play in, well, it does see play in Token Druid. That's really important. And Shaman. It's really, really good. I didn't even list any of those though. Emerald Reaver, 1 star. It is a 1-mana beast, but boy is that a bad 1-mana beast. Let me put this in perspective. Quest Hunter was so popular in terms of Theorycraft that people were convinced that I probably should rate this higher than 1 star. But anyways, we're stuck with our guns and this is a 1-star card. Rockpool Hunter, 3 stars. I believe it will absolutely see play in the Murloc Shaman deck, which we will have to see whether or not it ends up being a good deck. So I only rated this card 3 stars because of exactly Murloc Shaman, but Murloc Paladin ends up being the place to be in, and it's a 5-star card because it's across mid-range Paladin and Murloc Paladin, and is a really powerful card that like cements the early game of it. Stubborn Gastropod, 1 star. The card just doesn't have enough impact. Yep, 1 star for not enough impact. Ravisar Runt, 5 stars. I think this card will see inclusion in quite a few decks, including but not limited to token decks, decks that get a bunch of cards out early, such as even Pirate Warrior. It's just very efficient for the cost. You would think with all the token decks out there, between Token Druid, Token Shaman, and even Pirate Warrior, that Ravisar Runt would actually possibly see play. But it just turns out that because the condition is actually much harder than expected to pull off, this card doesn't see much play and is actually a 2-star card. It saw a lot of experimentation and is still lightly in some of those decks sometimes. Volatile Elemental, 1 star. Stats be weak. 1 star, stats be weak. Primal Fin Lookout, 3 stars. Alongside Rockpool Hunter, it should see inclusion in Murloc decks. Turns out that this card is 1 star. There are a lot of Murlocs being played in Paladin, but this card doesn't make the cut because Stonehill Defender is just so much better. Tar Creeper, 5 stars. I see Tar Creeper being included across a lot of decks. Well, the most obvious of which are Shaman Elemental and Mage Elemental, but also potentially a general tech include if aggro overruns the place. So this one's one of those right for the wrong reasons. It is a 5-star card. Elemental decks aren't really a thing right now, but every single elemental deck does run the Tar Creeper. Surprisingly, sees play in an aggressive deck, which I don't think people were expecting. It sees play in that Token Druid deck a lot. Sees play in Taunt Warrior, because it's a very good taunt. Thunder Lizard, 1 star. I felt like I could not fit this card into the elemental decks. There were just more good stuff to put in there. Yep, 1 star, doesn't fit into elemental decks, there's better cards. Eggnapper, 1 star. Total stat value just isn't enough for... Eggnapper turns out to be a 2-star card due to its fringe utility use in Token Druid. Giant Wasp, 3 stars. I put this into my Beast Druid deck. It might be a stand-in for Mulch in general, and 3 mana to remove anything or require an answer seems solid. The more I play this card in Arena, it's really good in Arena, the more I think, hey, this is actually a reasonable card in Druid. But the 2 health, it's pretty tough between all the consecrations and volcanic potions out there. So 1-star card. And Beast Druid isn't really a thing. Pterodax Hatchling, 1 star. That is a very inefficient mana to stat ratio card. 1 star, stats suck. Igneous Elemental, 5 stars. I see this card as an include in most elemental decks in order to activate their Stone Shaper card on 4. And past that, it also gives you the handy flexibility to activate 2 more elementals in the future. Also, I think this card is good in Discard Warlock because you get 2 cards into your hand, which can be discarded for the cheap because they're not very good cards. 5 stars, correct for the super wrong reasons. I thought it was going to be fodder for the Quest Warlock. I thought Elemental decks would run it. It's too slow for Elemental decks. Quest Warlock is terrible. But Quest Rogue is carrying this card hard. It's currently popular to run 2 copies of this in Quest Rogue. Fireplume Phoenix, 2 stars. I think it's one of the weaker elemental cards, but it's one of the few cards for Shaman. Just a question of whether or not there's too many cards in that deck and whether or not this card will fit. Turns out this card didn't quite fit in there. 1 star. I didn't really see this played anywhere at any time. Stegodon, 1 star. Poor stat to mana ratio. Yep, 1 star. Nesting Rock, 1 star. While this has a reasonable stat to mana ratio, especially if you get Taunt, I see very few decks that can secure 2 other minions and land this card. You can argue that it's not bad when you land it without Taunt, especially in maybe Beast Druid or Beast Hunter, but other cards are more powerful. Barely made the push into some mid-range Hunter decks, and for that, it's a 2-star card. It's run in some Hunter decks. I would even say very few mid-range Hunter decks run it, but just enough. If it sees play in some competitive decks, it's good enough to go into 2 stars. Saber-Tooth Stalker, 1 star. You're going to feel very bad when you spend 6 mana for a card and it gets answered much cheaper. That means you lose a lot of tempo. Yep, 1 star. 6 mana, 2 health. Stormwatcher, 1 star. Extremely poor stat to mana ratio. Yep, 1 star. Sated Threshodon, 1 star. Poor stat to mana ratio on a card that costs a lot of mana. Yep, 1 star. Because it costs too much. Giant Mastodon, 1 star. Poor stat to mana ratio. Yep, 1 star. It's really easy to call the ones that are just mostly vanilla with bad stat to mana ratios. Ultrasaur, 1 star. It's actually not bad stat for mana ratio, but the card costs 10 mana and doesn't do anything immediately. 1 star, but he made his way into all of our hearts. It's pretty hard to cast 10 mana cards. Galaka Crawler, 4 stars. Wow. Why is this card 4 stars? Well, it's a 2 mana, 2/3 beast that could actually see play naturally in some beast decks. But more than that, I kind of looked ahead on what I thought the meta was going to be. And I thought Pirate Warrior was going to be a very major deck. If there ends up being a lot of Pirate Warrior, you're going to see Galactic Crawler in competitive play to answer those Pirate Warriors. And not just Pirate Warrior, there's also a number of decks that could run patches. And the card Galactic Crawler will really keep a lid on the Pirate Warrior, which looks to be the most threatening aggressive deck right now. I'm actually going to go even one step further. Galactic Crawler ends up being a 5-star card. Hunter runs it, mostly, mid-range Hunter. Token Druid usually does run 2 copies of that card. And Galactic Crawler did end up being a major tech choice whenever Pirate Warriors, their numbers rise, Galactic Crawler came to eat them. And it's a big force in tournaments, the Galactic Crawler. Humongous Razor Leaf. Welcome to the surprise rating of the set. 5 stars. Why am I rating this card 5 stars? Well, I believe this card single-handedly brings an archetype back into contention. Or maybe not single-handedly, but is a serious impact on hand luck. Well, look at the stat value. That's 12 stats for 3 mana. Obviously, you need to combine it with something. I'm not even suggesting combining it with Silence, because Silence typically costs too much. Yes, you might think, ooh, Priest, Purify, ooh, use the 5 mana 5/5 Silence. But no, I'm talking more practical. You play Ancient Watcher, you go back to your roots with Ancient Watcher, Humongous Razor Leaf, you do the Sunfury Protector, you do the Defender of Argus. It's good. Furthermore, you have Faceless Shambler. I think Handlock will be a tier 1 deck, and that's majorly because of Humongous Razor Leaf.
Alright, this is super almost right for all the wrong reasons. So Handlock didn't end up being a thing, but Silence Priest, and this is, I mean, no one was going to expect Silence Priest to be a thing, really. I think. Very, very few people did. It turns out that because of Humongous Razor Leaf, Purify started seeing play. Praise Purify and praise the Razor Leaf. It's still not a 5-star card quite yet because Silence Priest isn't a tier 1 deck, but 4 stars for the Humongous Razor Leaf. Even though Purify Priest, or Silence Priest, is weak tier 2, it's still tier 2. And 2 copies of it are always run in every deck, but this is like the card that made Silence Priest.
Vicious Fledgling, one of the few cards that can actually gain multiple adaptations over time. It's still just a 3 mana 3/3 to turn it plays. 1 star.
You know, it actually took a really long time for Vicious Fledgling to take flight in Token Druid, but this ends up being a 5-star card. This is, by the way, why I do the card reviews this far into the meta. Because if I did this review 1 month ago, Vicious Fledgling would still be a 1-star card. So since it's basically in all the Token Druids now, it's a 5-star card since Token Druid is a tier 1 deck.
Devilsaur Egg. 4 stars. I believe it will see play in exactly Zoo and exactly the type of Zoo which will not run the quest.
Devilsaur Egg turns out to be a 1-star card, but do look out for this card in the future.
Stonehill Defender. 1 star. This is probably only really a consideration if you're playing Taunt Warrior. And even then, I think this card was too slow tempo to run.
This card is the surprise of the set. Everyone looked at the 3 mana 1/4 and they were like, yeah, that's not going to work. But it turns out to not only be a 5-star card because it's in Taunt Warrior, but it's also in every single Paladin deck and even in some Shaman decks. In Paladin, you discover Tyrion, you discover Wicker Flame Burn Bristle. Needed to remember the name. That's, don't want to call it the Wicker Bum. And you discover Tarim. And then Shaman gets Wide Eyes, and they get Thing from Below. So it turns out that you can play a 3 mana 1/4.
Tovir Stoneshaper. 5 stars. One of the cards that makes Elemental decks so powerful. A 4 mana 3/5 Taunt Divine Shield is really strong. Zen'jin Shieldmaster was a good anti-aggro card. Now we turn it into both a Valley card and an even better anti-aggro card.
A 2-star card, and I only recently found out that it is a tech option in Quest Rogue. Since you play Firefly so often, Tovir Stoneshaper is a really good card to stop the beatdown.
Servant of Kalamos. 5 stars. We thought Azure Drake was good. Servant of Kalamos has 1 more health, and if you're Shaman, you get to discover the Shaman cards a bit higher at a rate.
Servant of Kalamos ends up being a 2-star card. It does see play in every Elemental Shaman deck, if those are still around, but it's just that Elemental Shaman decks aren't very popular right now. Arguably a 3-star, but Elemental Shaman has fallen so far that we're gonna still call it a 2.
Frozen Crusher. 1 star. I thought about putting this in Handlock, but then I decided that the sacrifice wasn't worth it.
6 mana 8/8 just isn't quite good enough because it can only attack every other turn.
This card is probably worth about 7 worth of stats. Adding that extra 1/1 with the severe weakness isn't that good. Volcanosaur. 1 star. If you're optimistic, you can think of this as neutral Ancient of War. Overall, it's not going to turn out as good as you want it to be.
I will say this, Volcanosaur ended up being better than people thought it was, but it is still a 1-star card. It wasn't nearly good enough to actually be run in any deck.
Emerald Hive Queen. 2 stars. I think this is excellent design. They finally made a 1 mana 2/3, which is not universally playable. Where might this card be played? It might be a card that sees play in Jade Druid, probably about the only deck I can think of that doesn't run minions.
Emerald Hive Queen ends up to be a 1-star card. I thought it could be an interesting anti-aggro tech choice, but we didn't have to go that aggressive for anti-aggro.
Gluttonous Ooze, 3 stars. If Galactic Crawler wasn't enough, you can still hate on pirates even more with the Gluttonous Ooze.
Wow, actually, it's really hard to get the rating exactly right, but Gluttonous Ooze is pretty much the definition of a 3-star card as a tech option run in some decks.
Bright-Eyed Scout, 2 stars. I see some limited application for this card. Either you're playing it in a deck which has average mana cost of 4 or higher, because it is a better Gnomish Inventor in that respect, or you put it in a deck with Hemet Jungle Hunter.
So surprisingly, and it is, again, really hard to rate a card 2-star and have it actually be 2 stars, but it is a 2-star card. It's running exactly Easy Big Druid.
Gentle Megasaur, 4 stars. This card has 2 possible applications. One is in the Shaman Murloc deck, where I think it probably has more application is in any deck which is running both the water package, and then the curator fetches this card and the Murloc, since this is the beast, and presumably the only beast you're going to be running with your Murlocs.
Kind of right for kind of the right reasons. So it's a 5-star card. It's being played in the Murloc Paladin and the mid-range Paladin, and it's in the deck because getting the 1-2-3 curve of Murlocs into the 4 Megasaur is so backbreaking. 4 mana 5/4 is not a great stat line, but combined with the power to adapt for free, that's really, really strong.
Bittertide Hydra, 5 stars. What a beast. I mean, I just look at the stats, 5 mana 8/8, and a beast. So what makes this card so good, whereas Fel Reaver wasn't? This is a sort of new standard, so there's fewer cards out there, and 5 mana 8/8 just seems strong.
So yes, it's actually a 5-star card. Token Druid very often runs this, and this is even run in many versions of Pirate Warrior. It's probably worth noting that Fel Reaver would be playable in this meta as well. What are all your question marks?
Hard countered by Volcano, but that probably doesn't matter much. Blazecaller, 5 stars. It's the neutral elemental lovers which are really pushing this elemental deck to be so strong. It sure seems very powerful.
This is one of those cards that looks really, really good on paper, but ultimately ends up just being in reality 2 stars. Turns out Blazecallers run in most of these elemental decks. Servant of Kalamos is run in most of these elemental decks, but these elemental decks are mostly tier 3-ish right now.
Portolan Primalist, 1 star. Paying 8 mana for a Hail Mary. Well, you could pay 10 mana for Yogg-Saron, but at least you were getting so many more targets, so many more spells. This one, just run Flamestrike instead, right?
Yep, ended up being 1 star because not enough Yogg.
Primordial Drake, 2 stars. I was a little bit surprised by this rating because there aren't that many good dragons left, and there's a good amount of beasts in this set, and there's some Murlocs in unusual places. So the curator can fetch a Murloc, a beast, and a dragon. My first instinct with Paladin was to run Paladin Beast and the Paladin Murloc and this dragon.
Oh, good instinct.
And also in Taunt Warrior. It seems like there's enough applications, but why is it
Taunt
only
Warrior.
2 stars? Because I don't think either deck is really going to work, and I don't think... Well, not that I think mid-range Paladin isn't going to work necessarily, but I don't think this Drake makes it there with the curator because the Beast and the Murloc are still kind of questionable. Not the Murloc. The Murloc's pretty good. The Beast, though. I'm not sure what Beast you fetch.
Kodo!
There's quite a few applications for this one, but ultimately I fear it may not come to fruition. And it's probably going to be a one-of if it does see play.
Alright, so it turns out that Primordial Drake is a one-of in mid-range Paladin, and even in Control Paladin, I believe. But it's a really good one-of because the curator gets exactly that dragon. It's so much better because of the curator. And Taunt Warrior runs 2 of these. Even Jade Druid runs the card just because it's such good anti-aggro. So, 5-star card.
Charged Devilsaur, 1 star. King Crush wasn't good. This card probably wouldn't be good even if it could attack heroes.
Yep, 1 star.
The Vorax, 1 star. 1 star because I don't think the buff Paladin deck will work. And also, I think it's far too optimistic to hope for a turn 10 the Vorax plus a Spike Ridge Steed. Although I will say that 2-card combo is one of the strongest 2-card combos I can think of.
I still want to cast the Vorax and the Spike Ridge Steed, but really tough in practice to do so, and so it is a 1-star card.
Spirit Singer Umbra, in perhaps the surprise card of review starage. I'm rating this a 1-star because I think Priest is absolute garbage, and I don't think very many other decks can take advantage of this.
Well, hey, this is one of the rare ones where I went super against the crowd, and well, it's not rare actually. If you go against the crowd and you rate something a 1-star that gets overhyped, you're actually usually right. It's a 1-star card. Turns out that currently the Deathrattle things that go with Umbra aren't there, but watch out for this in the future.
At least the Trailblazer, 4 stars. I personally put this into my Elemental Mage deck, and I put it into my Handlock deck. Possibly see play also in the Mage Quest deck. And it could see play anywhere. It's a 5-mana 5/5 in a world which has lost Azure Drake, and opening an Ungoro pack is pretty good. But it will probably need to be put into a control deck.
Yeah, this card is, I think, right on the dot at 4 stars. It goes into a variety of decks, and usually in tournaments, people are trying to fit in at least the Trailblazer to outgreed your opponent's greedy control deck, and at least is the perfect outgreed card. In Constructed, it's most often seen in Control Priest, where you can Shadow Visions the Ungoro pack.
Hemet Jungle Hunter, 3 stars. I pitched the card as really interesting, and I think that the card ultimately does not have any combo applications right now, but in mid-range or control decks, you will play this and it will give you better draws in the future.
Hemet Jungle Hunter, I'll actually give the 2-star treatment to. The reason for it is because there was a time where this looked like it was going to lead the strongest deck out there of Tempo Mage. You beat the opponent down early, you played Hemet Jungle Hunter, and then you Fireballed and Pyroblasted and Firelands portaled the opponent down from there.
Osric, which is a 1-star card. By the time you play the 9-mana card, you might already have been overrun by aggro, though admittedly if you haven't, this will be a tough wall for them to overcome. If you're up against mid-range decks, you could get hexed very commonly.
Yep, Osric, turns out it's a 1-star card because breaking your bones on his body just doesn't happen very often. And this concludes the ratings, which are probably, I would hope, the worst that I will miss on any rating ever. Again, the factors that led to this were, 1, so many decks are viable, and so many new ones popped up as a completely new meta with the first ever rotation. 2, so many of the cards actually required you to play them and experience them in order to know how powerful or not powerful they were, such as the Murloc quest, the Hunter quest, the Rogue quest, the Priest quest, although I got the Priest quest right. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the new ratings for the new expansion that will be starting to be hyped sometime next week, I believe. I look forward to being extremely accurate in those ratings, since it's an established meta now. Hey, if I'm as wrong again, it'll be a good laugh also.